People rarely laugh because they know the truth. They laugh because they think they already do. On a cool Saturday afternoon in early October, golden leaves drifted across the sidewalks of Westbridge, Connecticut, as families gathered outside the elegant Caldwell Manor. The sprawling estate, dressed in white stone and framed by centuries-old oak trees, had become the centerpiece of the city's annual scholarship celebration hosted by Caldwell Industries. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway while photographers welcomed guests dressed in designer suits and sparkling evening gowns. Nathan Brooks looked at the invitation one more time before folding it carefully and slipping it back into the inside pocket of his weathered brown jacket. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean, neatly pressed, and warm enough for the crisp autumn air. Beside him, his 12-year-old daughter Lily adjusted the navy blue dress she had borrowed from her school counselor for the evening. "Dad," she whispered while staring at the enormous mansion. "Are you sure we're supposed to be here?" Nathan smiled softly. "We were invited, sweetheart. But everyone looks wealthier?" She hesitated before nodding. Nathan chuckled quietly, not with bitterness but with the calm acceptance of someone who had stopped measuring people by appearances years ago. "We're here because you earned your scholarship. Nobody can take that away from you." Lily squeezed the invitation in her small hands and smiled back, though uncertainty still lingered behind her bright blue eyes. As they walked toward the entrance, conversation slowed for just a second. Some guests glanced at Nathan's worn leather boots. Others noticed the faded pickup truck parked much farther away from the luxury vehicles. One couple assumed he must be a maintenance contractor who had entered through the wrong gate. Nathan noticed every look. He had learned to recognize silent judgment long before Lily was born. He simply kept walking. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers reflected warm golden light across marble floors polished to perfection. Waiters carried silver trays filled with champagne, while a string quartet performed. Quietly near the stage, giant banners displayed the Caldwell Industries logo above photographs celebrating decades of corporate success and charitable giving. Everything about the evening seemed designed to remind guests that prestige could be built, displayed, and admired. Lily's eyes widened as she admired the decorations. "It's beautiful." "It is," Nathan agreed. "And thank you for bringing me. There was never a chance I'd miss this." She slipped her hand into his. For Nathan, that simple gesture mattered more than the luxurious surroundings. Months of working double shifts repairing commercial HVAC systems had barely covered rent and school expenses. Every extra dollar had gone toward giving Lily opportunities he never had. Watching her smile made every sacrifice worthwhile. Near the registration table, volunteers greeted arriving scholarship recipients. One volunteer checked Lily's name against the list and smiled warmly. "Congratulations, Lily Brooks. We're honored to have you here." Lily beamed with pride. Nathan stood quietly beside her, content to remain unnoticed. Across the ballroom, Victoria Caldwell, the celebrated CEO whose company funded hundreds of scholarships every year, was greeting investors, city officials, and local media. Confident, elegant, and perfectly composed, she moved effortlessly through the crowd as cameras followed her every step. Nathan glanced at her for only a brief moment before looking away. His expression remained unreadable. It had been many years. He doubted she would remember him. And if she did, he hoped she wouldn't. The quickest judgment is usually the furthest from the truth. Lily proudly pinned the small scholarship badge onto her dress while a volunteer handed her a program for the evening's ceremony. "Congratulations," the young woman said with a cheerful smile. "Please take your seats. The scholarship recipients will be recognized after Ms. Caldwell's opening remarks." "Thank you," Lily answered politely. Nathan nodded with quiet appreciation before leading his daughter toward the ballroom. He deliberately chose seats near the back. He had never been comfortable standing where attention naturally gathered. Tonight belonged to Lily, not him. As guests continued arriving, conversations floated through the room. "That's the mayor. I heard 3 senators are attending. Victoria Caldwell's annual gala gets bigger every year." Every name carried influence. Every introduction sounded rehearsed. Nathan simply listened without joining any conversation. Lily leaned closer. Dad, isn't that the CEO? Across the ballroom, Victoria Caldwell stood beneath an enormous crystal chandelier surrounded by executives, reporters, and local politicians. At 42, she carried herself with effortless confidence. Her tailored emerald evening gown matched the elegance of the estate itself, and every smile she offered seemed perfectly timed for another camera flash. Nathan looked only briefly. Yes. You've heard of her? Everybody has. His answer was technically true. It simply wasn't the whole truth. A waiter approached carrying glasses of sparkling cider. Nathan accepted one for Lily and quietly thanked him. As he turned away, another guest accidentally stepped into his path, causing a few drops to splash onto the polished marble floor. Oh! Nathan immediately reached for a napkin from a nearby table and knelt to wipe it away before anyone could slip. At that exact moment, Victoria Caldwell entered the ballroom from the opposite side, speaking with two board members. She noticed a man kneeling on the floor with a napkin in his hand. Without slowing her pace, she smiled politely. Excuse me. Nathan stood. I'm sorry. Victoria barely glanced at his face. She assumed exactly what several others already had. Could someone ask housekeeping to finish this section? She said to one of the event coordinators. Guests will be arriving in this area. The coordinator looked uncertain. Before he could respond, Victoria had already continued greeting donors. Nathan quietly folded the damp napkin and placed it on the tray of a passing waiter. He never corrected her. Lily looked confused. Dad? It's all right. But she thought. I know. But you're not. Nathan gently interrupted with a reassuring smile. Sometimes people only see what they're expecting to see. His voice held no anger. Only experience. Nearby, two businessmen had watched the entire exchange. I figured he worked here. So did I. He certainly doesn't look like one of the scholarship families. Nathan heard every word. Years ago, comments like those would have ignited something inside him. Not anymore. Life had taught him that defending his pride to strangers rarely changed their minds. Protecting Lily's peace mattered far more. Moments later, another volunteer approached. Mr. Brooks? Nathan turned. Yes? We've reserved the front row for scholarship families. Would you and Lily please come with me? Several nearby guests looked surprised. One woman quietly whispered, He's a recipient's father? Another replied, Really? I thought he was event staff. Nathan thanked the volunteer without acknowledging the stares. As he and Lily walked toward the front of the ballroom, Victoria happened to glance across the room once more. For the briefest moment, her eyes narrowed. Something about the quiet father seemed oddly familiar. She searched her memory for a face she couldn't quite place. But before the thought could settle, another reporter stepped in front of her camera, and the fleeting sense of recognition disappeared as quickly as it had come. A person's character is often revealed long before the truth ever is. The ballroom lights dimmed as the string quartet finished its final piece. A spotlight settled on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies announced. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Caldwell Industries, Ms. Victoria Caldwell. The room erupted into applause. Victoria walked confidently to the podium, her smile polished, her posture flawless. Every movement reflected years of leading boardrooms, negotiating billion-dollar contracts, and commanding the admiration of everyone around her. She thanked the sponsors, city officials, and donors before speaking about opportunity, education, and the importance of investing in the next generation. Lily listened carefully. I like her, she whispered. Nathan smiled faintly. She's accomplished a great deal. After several minutes, Victoria invited the scholarship recipients to stand as their names appeared on the large screen behind her. One by one, children rose to warm applause. Lily Brooks. Lily stood immediately. Nathan clapped proudly, his eyes never leaving his daughter. Congratulations, Victoria said warmly from the stage. Each of you represents perseverance and hope. The audience applauded again. Then Victoria stepped away from the podium to personally greet several families seated in the front rows. Cameras followed closely as reporters captured every handshake. When she reached Lily, her smile was genuine. "Congratulations, Lily." "Thank you, ma'am." Victoria turned toward Nathan. For a brief second she hesitated. Recognition still refused to come. Instead, her eyes drifted to his worn jacket, inexpensive watch, and weathered boots. She smiled politely. "You must be very proud." "I am." "What do you do?" "I repair commercial heating and cooling systems." Victoria nodded. "A hard-working profession." There was nothing openly insulting in her tone. Yet something about the way she emphasized the words created an invisible distance between them. Before Nathan could respond, one of the board members leaned toward Victoria and quietly said, "The donor reception is waiting." She glanced toward the private lounge reserved for executives and major contributors. Then she looked back at Nathan. "I'm sorry, but this reception area is reserved for sponsors and special guests." Nathan remained calm. "I understand." Lily blinked. "But we're sitting in the front because—" Nathan gently touched her shoulder. "It's all right." Victoria offered another practiced smile. "There will be refreshments available for scholarship families after the ceremony." She turned to leave. One nearby investor chuckled softly. "I suppose everyone likes to wander into the VIP section." Another guest laughed. "Can't blame him. Free food always attracts people." Several people nearby joined in. The laughter wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Lily's cheeks immediately turned red. She lowered her eyes toward the floor, wishing the moment would disappear. Nathan noticed her trembling hand. He quietly knelt beside her chair. "Look at me." She did. "Did we come here for them?" She slowly shook her head. "Why did we come?" "For my scholarship." "And who earned it?" "I did." He smiled. "Exactly?" Her breathing slowly steadied. Across the room, Victoria accepted compliments from donors completely unaware that her simple assumption had embarrassed the very family she had invited to celebrate. The ceremony resumed. But the atmosphere had changed. Some guests continued whispering whenever Nathan walked past. Others simply ignored him. Only Lily noticed that her father never once looked offended. He wasn't pretending. He genuinely refused to let strangers decide how much peace he would carry inside himself. As another round of applause filled the ballroom, an elderly man seated several rows behind Nathan quietly stared at him. His expression slowly changed from curiosity to disbelief. He leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered almost under his breath, "I've seen that man before, but not in a place anyone would ever forget." Sometimes the people who recognize greatness are the ones who have carried the same burdens. The applause faded as the scholarship ceremony continued, but the elderly man's attention never left Nathan Brooks. His silver eyebrows tightened. His breathing slowed. He searched through memories buried decades deep. "No," he murmured almost to himself. The woman beside him glanced over. "What is it, Frank?" "I've seen that man." "From where?" Frank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched Nathan help Lily straighten the scholarship certificate she had almost dropped. The father smiled gently, whispered something that made his daughter laugh, then returned to quietly applauding another student's achievement. Nothing about him demanded attention. Yet something about his posture felt strangely familiar. Not the clothes. Not the face. The posture. The calm. The habit of constantly scanning every doorway without appearing to do so. Frank leaned forward. "I served 26 years in the Army National Guard," he whispered. "You never forget the way career soldiers carry themselves." "You think he's military?" "I don't know." He paused. "But I know he isn't just an HVAC technician." Across the ballroom, another guest had reached the same conclusion. An older woman wearing a gold star mother pin quietly studied Nathan before speaking to her husband. "Look at his left wrist." "What about it?" "The tan line." "So?" That's where a military-issued watch usually sits. Her husband looked again. I think you're imagining things. Maybe. But she wasn't convinced. Meanwhile, Lily noticed several people glancing toward her father. Dad? Yes? Why are they looking at you now? Nathan smiled. They're probably wondering if the dessert table is open yet. She giggled. You always make jokes. They help. He deliberately changed the subject. So, how does your scholarship certificate feel? She looked down at it. It feels like maybe I really can become a veterinarian someday. You absolutely can. You really believe that? I've never believed anything more. Her smile returned. The embarrassment from earlier slowly began to fade. That mattered more to Nathan than anything happening around them. Near the stage, Victoria Caldwell continued greeting donors between speeches. Every so often, however, she found herself glancing toward the quiet father seated with his daughter. Something refused to leave her mind. His voice. His eyes. Even the way he had answered her questions without the slightest trace of resentment. Most people who felt insulted became defensive. He hadn't. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. One of her executives noticed. You know him? Victoria shook her head. I don't think so. But? She hesitated. I have this strange feeling that I've met him somewhere. Business? No. College? No. The answer remained frustratingly out of reach. Just then, another donor approached Victoria with a handshake, pulling her attention away once again. Across the room, Frank quietly stood from his chair. I'm getting some coffee, he told his wife. Instead, he slowly walked toward Nathan. Not directly. Carefully. As though trying to confirm a memory without disturbing it. When he reached the aisle beside Nathan's row, he intentionally paused. Nathan looked up politely. Their eyes met. For only a second. Frank's heart skipped. There. It was. Not recognition. Confirmation. Nathan gave him a courteous nod, the same brief nod soldiers often exchanged with strangers they instinctively respected. Nothing more. No words. Frank continued walking. But once he reached the refreshment table, he stopped completely. He turned back toward the ballroom, his face now drained of color. Quietly, almost in disbelief, he whispered, If that's really who I think it is, then everyone in this room has been looking at the wrong person all evening. Respect is earned in silence long before it is spoken aloud. Frank waited until the applause began again before approaching Nathan's row. He stopped a respectful distance away. Excuse me, he said quietly. Nathan looked up. Yes? Frank studied his face one more time. I apologize if this sounds strange. Nathan simply waited. Were you ever stationed at Fort Bragg? For the first time that evening, Nathan's expression changed ever so slightly. Only for a heartbeat. Many years ago. Frank's pulse quickened. I knew it. Nathan smiled politely. It was a long time ago. You were with the engineering battalion, weren't you? Nathan gave a small nod. For a while. Frank let out a slow breath. My son served there. I'm glad to hear that. He talked about one officer constantly. Nathan's smile faded into quiet humility. There were many officers. But only one who stayed behind during that warehouse collapse. Nathan lowered his eyes. You remember the wrong stories. No. Frank shook his head firmly. My son survived because someone refused to leave until every soldier was accounted for. Nathan said nothing. Frank noticed a familiar response immediately. The men his son had admired never enjoyed talking about themselves. I've wanted to thank that officer for years. Nathan answered gently. Your thanks belong to every person who was there. Frank smiled. And that's exactly what my son said you would say. Lily listened quietly, surprised. Dad? Nathan looked at her. You were in the army? A long time ago. You never told me. You never asked? She laughed softly. I guess I didn't. Their conversation remained calm and private. Neither man realized that someone else had begun paying attention. Victoria Caldwell. She had just finished another interview with a local television station when she noticed Frank speaking to Nathan with unmistakable respect. Not casual conversation. Respect. The kind usually reserved for someone whose reputation preceded them. She frowned slightly. Frank Ellison was one of the city's most respected philanthropists, a retired military commander, and someone whose opinions carried weight with nearly everyone in attendance. Why would he be speaking to an HVAC technician like that? Curiosity slowly replaced distraction. She excused herself from the reporters and watched from several feet away. Frank extended his hand. Nathan accepted it. Nothing unusual. Except that Frank's handshake carried unmistakable admiration. "Thank you," Frank said sincerely. Nathan looked almost uncomfortable. "There isn't anything to thank me for." "There is." Nathan simply smiled. "I hope your son is doing well. He owns his own construction company now." "I'm happy to hear that. He still tells your story?" Nathan looked away toward Lily. "I'd rather he'd build his own." Frank nodded with quiet understanding. Before leaving, he glanced toward Victoria. Their eyes met briefly. He noticed the confusion on her face. He understood it immediately. Without saying a word, he simply offered her a subtle smile that seemed to say, "You don't know who you've been talking to." Victoria felt an unexpected knot form in her stomach. She turned back toward Nathan. He was kneeling beside Lily again, helping her carefully place the scholarship certificate back into its protective folder. Nothing about him had changed. The same worn jacket. The same inexpensive shoes. The same gentle smile. Yet somehow, everything looked different now. For the first time that evening, Victoria stopped seeing what Nathan owned. She began wondering what he had carried. And for reasons she couldn't yet explain, she suddenly felt that her first impression had cost her something far more valuable than she had realized. The truth rarely arrives with a loud announcement. More often, it appears as a quiet question no one can ignore. Victoria waited until Frank stepped away before walking toward him. "Colonel Ellison," she called politely. Frank stopped. "Victoria, I hope you enjoyed the ceremony." "I did." She hesitated before lowering her voice. "The gentleman you were speaking with?" Frank's expression remained neutral. "Yes? You seem to know him." "A little." Victoria searched his face. "Who is he?" Frank looked across the ballroom where Nathan and Lily were sharing a slice of chocolate cake. Nathan had carefully given his own dessert to his daughter without making it obvious. "He seems like a good father," Frank said. "I noticed that." "He is." Victoria smiled politely. "I meant, professionally." Frank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "Why does that matter now?" She paused. "I may have misjudged him." Frank nodded. "We all do that sometimes. I'd like to correct it." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Then perhaps start by knowing the man instead of his resume." Victoria felt the words settle heavily. Before she could ask another question, Frank excused himself and walked toward the exit. He had revealed nothing. Yet somehow he had said enough. Across the room, Nathan noticed Lily staring at a framed collection of photographs displayed along one wall. Each picture captured a different year of the Scholarship Foundation. Students. Volunteers. Community leaders. Near the center hung an older black and white photograph from nearly 20 years earlier. Lily tilted her head. "Dad? What is it? Doesn't this man look like you?" Nathan followed her gaze. His eyes rested on the photograph for only a moment. A much younger soldier stood beside several disaster relief volunteers after a devastating hurricane. His uniform was dusty. His face thinner. His smile almost identical. Nathan quietly looked away. "People often resemble each other." Lily wasn't convinced. "It really looks like you. Maybe a distant cousin." She laughed. "You don't have any cousins. I was hoping you'd forgotten that." Before she could study the photograph again, Another group of guests gathered in front of it, blocking the view. The moment passed. Or so Nathan hoped. Meanwhile, Victoria found herself walking toward the same display without consciously deciding to. She stopped before the photographs. One image immediately caught her attention. A hurricane relief operation. Military engineers. Civilian volunteers. Something stirred inside her memory. Not a face. A feeling. Rain. Collapsed buildings. Mud. Someone carrying frightened children across flooded streets. Her heartbeat quickened. No. That couldn't be. She leaned closer to read the small brass plaque beneath the picture. Most of the names had faded over time. Only a few remained legible. She traced them slowly with her eyes. Then she stopped. Nathan. The surname had become almost impossible to read after years of polishing. Only the first few letters remained visible. B.R. A staff member approached. Beautiful photo, isn't it? Victoria nodded absent-mindedly. When was this taken? About 18 years ago during hurricane relief efforts. She continued staring. Something inside her refused to let go. At that same moment, Nathan gently placed his arm around Lily's shoulders. Ready to head home? She smiled brightly. Best night ever. He laughed softly. I'm glad. Neither of them noticed Victoria watching from across the room. Not with judgment. Not with curiosity. But with the unmistakable expression of someone standing at the edge of a memory that was finally beginning to return. And for the first time all evening. She wasn't wondering who Nathan Brooks was. She was wondering why forgetting him suddenly felt like the greatest mistake of her life. A single memory can change the meaning of an entire evening. Nathan and Lily stepped into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered across the parking lot as families slowly returned to their cars, carrying flowers, certificates, and proud smiles. Lily hugged her scholarship folder against her chest. I'll never forget tonight. Nathan smiled. I hope you remember the right parts. I will. The applause? She shook her head. My scholarship? He nodded. Good. As they reached Nathan's old pickup truck, Lily climbed inside while he carefully buckled her seatbelt, a habit he had never abandoned. Even though she insisted she was old enough to do it herself. Across the parking lot, Victoria hurried through the main entrance. Mr. Brooks. Nathan turned. She slowed as she approached, suddenly unsure of what she intended to say. I'm glad I caught you. Nathan waited patiently. She paused. I wanted to thank you for attending tonight. It was Lily's achievement. Of course. Silence settled between them. Victoria took a slow breath. I also wanted to apologize. Nathan looked at her kindly. For what? She almost laughed at the question. For assuming things I shouldn't have. You weren't the only one making assumptions. She blinked. I assumed you were having a difficult day. She frowned. Weren't you? No. He glanced toward Lily, who was smiling through the truck window. My daughter earned a scholarship. He smiled again. That makes today one of the best days of my life. Victoria felt her carefully prepared apologies slipping away. Most people would have accepted it. Some would have used it to embarrass her. Nathan simply refused to carry the offense. I still treated you unfairly. You treated someone you didn't know. I should have known better. Perhaps. His voice held no accusation. Only honesty. Victoria lowered her eyes. I saw the photograph inside. Nathan remained silent. Were you there? I was. You helped during the hurricane relief mission. We all helped. You never mentioned it. You never asked? The words landed gently. Yet they struck harder than criticism ever could. Before Victoria could continue, Frank Ellison walked across the parking lot carrying his coat. I thought I'd find you here, he said. Victoria turned. Colonel. Frank smiled. You finally remembered? Not completely. You will. Victoria looked between the two men. I've been trying all evening to understand why he seemed familiar. Frank nodded. Because 18 years ago your family's foundation sent volunteers to that hurricane. Victoria's eyes widened. My father worked alongside military engineers for 3 days. Nathan quietly interrupted. Your father worked harder than anyone there. Frank smiled knowingly. And who pulled him out after the second warehouse collapsed? Victoria's breathing stopped. Frank answered before Nathan could. The man standing in front of you. Nathan sighed almost imperceptibly. It wasn't only me. No, Frank agreed. But your father spent the rest of his life telling everyone that a young army captain refused to leave until every civilian made it out alive. Victoria stared at Nathan. The memories rushed back all at once. The muddy boots. The exhausted soldiers. Her father returning home with tears in his eyes. The photograph that had always stood in his office. A young officer smiling awkwardly while trying to avoid every camera. Her voice barely escaped. Captain Brooks. Nathan gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. That was a very long time ago. Victoria felt her eyes fill with tears. All evening she had measured him by a worn jacket, only to discover she was standing before the man her own father had called one of the finest leaders he had ever known. The greatest measure of a person's character is what remains after the applause has ended. The parking lot fell quiet. Families drove away one by one, carrying home memories of celebration. Victoria stood motionless. She looked at Nathan as though she were seeing him for the very first time. I don't know how to apologize for this, she said softly. Nathan leaned against his old pickup. You already have. No. She shook her head. I apologized because I thought I had been rude. She swallowed. Now I realize I failed to recognize someone who deserved my respect long before I knew his name. Nathan smiled gently. Respect isn't something that belongs to the past. Frank folded his arms. That's why he never asked for it. Victoria looked from Frank back to Nathan. My father kept a photograph in his office for years. Nathan laughed quietly. He always complained that photographer wouldn't stop following us. Victoria smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. He said the young captain in that picture taught him what leadership looked like. Nathan lowered his gaze. There were many better leaders than me. Frank chuckled. And that's another reason men trusted you. Silence settled comfortably among them. Lily finally climbed out of the truck. She looked at Victoria with innocent curiosity. Are you crying? Victoria laughed softly as she wiped her eyes. A little. My dad says crying isn't always because you're sad. Nathan nodded. That's true. Lily smiled. Sometimes it's because your heart finally understands something. Victoria looked at the little girl in amazement. Your father taught you that? He teaches me lots of things. Nathan smiled awkwardly. I mostly remind her to finish her homework. Everyone laughed. The tension disappeared completely. Victoria reached into her purse and removed a business card. I know this won't repay anything. Nathan immediately interrupted. There isn't anything to repay. I know. She handed him the card anyway. But if Lily ever decides she wants an internship with our Environmental Research Foundation while she's studying veterinary medicine. She smiled at Lily. There will always be a place waiting for her. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Victoria nodded. Not because of your father. She knelt until they were eye level. Because anyone who worked this hard for a scholarship deserves every opportunity that follows. Lily looked proudly toward Nathan. He gave a small approving nod. She accepted the card with both hands. Thank you? No, Victoria answered. Thank you? Frank glanced toward Nathan. You know. They'll probably be talking about you inside for weeks. Nathan sighed with playful resignation. I was hoping everyone would forget me by tomorrow morning. They won't. I'll survive. Frank smiled. I know you will. Nathan opened the driver's door. Before climbing inside, he looked back at Victoria. Take care of the scholarship. She seemed surprised. I will. Children remember moments like tonight for the rest of their lives. I understand. They don't need perfection. He smiled warmly. They only need to know someone believed in them. Victoria nodded slowly. I'll remember that. Nathan climbed into the truck. The old engine rumbled to life. As the pickup disappeared into the night, Victoria remained standing beside Frank. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Frank broke the silence. Interesting evening. Victoria watched the taillights disappear around the corner. The most important man in the room, she smiled to herself, was the one who spent the entire night making sure his daughter felt like she was. And for the first time since becoming CEO, Victoria understood that true leadership was never announced by titles, wealth, or recognition. Sometimes it arrived wearing worn work boots, driving an aging pickup truck, quietly choosing to let someone else shine. The legacy we leave behind is rarely measured by what we keep, but by the lives we quietly lived along the way. 6 months later, spring had arrived. The trees outside the community college campus were covered in fresh green leaves as students hurried between classes with backpacks and coffee cups. Nathan's old pickup rolled slowly into the parking lot. Lily climbed out, holding another envelope in her hands. She could hardly stop smiling. Dad, what is it? I got accepted into the summer veterinary research program. Nathan grinned. I never doubted you. You always say that. Because it's true. She hugged him tightly. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Nathan gently rested his hand on her shoulder. One day you'll realize something. What? I only walked beside you. You did much more than that. Before Nathan could answer, another car pulled into the parking lot. Victoria stepped out carrying a folder. She smiled as she approached. I hoped I'd catch you. Lily laughed. You always have perfect timing. Victoria handed her another envelope. Our foundation officially approved your internship. Lily covered her mouth in disbelief. Really? Victoria nodded. You earned every bit of it. Lily looked at Nathan. He simply smiled. Go ahead. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a welcome letter, a mentorship schedule, and a small handwritten note. Never let anyone convince you that kindness is smaller than success. Lily looked up. You wrote this? Victoria smiled. No. She turned toward Nathan. Your father said something very similar the night we met. Nathan chuckled softly. I don't remember saying that. You probably don't. Victoria laughed. You says things like that naturally. For a moment, the three of them stood together beneath the morning sun. No speeches. No audience. No applause. Just gratitude. Across the parking lot, Frank happened to be leaving a nearby veterans fundraiser. He spotted Nathan and raised a hand. Nathan waved back. Frank smiled to himself before continuing on his way. Some stories never needed another chapter. They simply continued through the people they touched. As Nathan prepared to leave, Lily stopped him. Dad? Yes? When people remember you. He smiled. I hope they don't remember me very much. She shook her head. They will. Then I hope they remember that I loved you. She wrapped her arms around him. They will remember both. Nathan closed his eyes for a brief moment. In that quiet embrace, every long workday, every sacrifice, every lonely evening after becoming a single father found its answer. Not in medals. Not in recognition. Not in old photographs. But in the confident young woman standing before him. Victoria watched them drive away in the same weathered pickup that had first caught her attention months earlier. Nothing about the truck had changed. Nothing about Nathan's clothes had changed. Nothing about his humility had changed. The only thing that had changed was the way people chose to see him. And perhaps that was the lesson all along. The strongest people rarely announce their strength. The kindest hearts seldom demand recognition. The greatest parents often leave no monuments behind. Instead, they leave children who walk into the world carrying courage, compassion, and quiet dignity. Because in the end, Nathan Brooks was never the most important person in the room. He simply made sure the most important person in his life always believed that she was. And that was the kind of greatness no title could ever equal.